Ladies and gentlemen, the Buffalo Sabres are now turning a corner, but we all know that they are in this current rebuilding position because of their fair share of bad contracts from the past. Today I thought it would be fun to make you guys as miserable as me and talk about 10 of the worst contracts handed out by the Sabres over the last decade. Starting out at number 10 with Rasmus Ristolainen, who was signed to a 6-year, $32.4 million deal with an annual average salary of $5.4 million a season. Tim Murray gave Risto this long-term contract after his breakout 2015-16 season, in which he scored 9 goals and had 41 points. But more concerningly, he had a plus-minus of minus 53 over his second and third years in the NHL. As we remember quite clearly, Risto was a heavy hitter, and his grit was certainly appealing for a young Sabres team at the time. And when his contract was signed, nobody was really concerned, as he was seen as one of the brightest young blue liners in the NHL. Much like of the rest of the team, though, Risto stagnated, having point totals of 45, 41, 43, 33, and 18 in his final 5 years with the Sabres. He can never progress past his defensively troublesome, gritty, and power play specialist role with the team. He was meant to be the Sabres' next number one defenseman, but when he failed to develop, the Sabres had to move in a different direction with Rasmus Dahlin. Looking back on this contract, it wasn't the worst, with him costing around $5.4 million, as I mentioned before, but it should have been made much shorter. The saving grace about this deal is that it gave GM Kevin Adams enough time to get a first from Risto from Philly. I bet they're not regretting this trade now, huh? Number 9, Jack Eichel. The face of the franchise, or so we thought, signed an 8-year, $80 million extension with the Sabres. By this point, both sides were starting to become frustrated with each other, and while that story has been covered plenty of times by people far more informed than me, I should still briefly cover it here. Eichel, who had shown slow but promising progress over the course of his entry-level deal, signed his blockbuster contract back in 2018 with the hope that he'd be able to see it through. But the Sabres and Eichel didn't, and as we all know, he was traded for a first, Alex Tuch, and Peyton Krebs to the Vegas Golden Knights. So, why does this contract get on this list? And that's for one reason. It's so expensive and long. One of the biggest problems in trying to deal Eichel was that no contending team had the cap space to be able to take on Eichel's full $10 million salary on. It's amazing that Kevin Adams was able to freshly clean his hands of this deal, and it's even more amazing that Vegas was able to fit Eichel into their payroll. Eichel certainly lived up to his contract, but its terms and no movement clause were both seemingly ticking time bombs. Number 8, Cody Franson. A pylon impersonating an NHL defenseman, Franson signed with the Sabres in 2015. Franson was a terrible defenseman before his time with the Sabres, so why they decided to bring him in is beyond me. He was brought in for a scoring touch, best seen during his last 2 seasons with the Maple Leafs, where he had 32 and 33 points. But once he came to the Buffalo Sabres, though, his scoring touch dried up and his lack of good skating was exposed. In 2017, he took 17 minor penalties, which tells you he couldn't keep up with a faster league. He had a high number of giveaways and was not great in his own zone. He played on the third pairing during his final year in Buffalo and quietly departed to Chicago, then out of North America entirely shortly after that. Number 7, Cody McCormick. A longtime enforcer, McCormick was signed by the Sabres to a 3-year deal worth $4.5 million. It's not the money here that is strange, it's the number of years they signed McCormick to. He was always signed to be a fourth-line enforcer, but he was always injured and couldn't fulfill his role to the team. But this wasn't necessarily his fault, more a cruel stroke of unluckiness. In January of 2015, McCormick was diagnosed with blood clots and was forced to miss the rest of the Tank Bowl season that was 2014-15. Unfortunately, he was never able to suit up again and had to retire after missing the entire 2015-16 season. He falls here mainly because he only played 33 games in his 3-year deal, which of course wasn't even his fault. Number 6, Taylor Hall. He was signed to appease Sabres fans and Jack Eichel, and he got a 1-year deal with the Sabres worth $8 million. This great signing scored just twice in 37 games, meaning Buffalo paid him an average of $4 million for each of his goals. He was utterly ineffective with Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart, never meshed well with Ralph Krueger's system, and then forced his way out at the trade deadline to hated rival in Boston. He was a part of the old core of the Sabres that were paid a lot but never really wanted to be here in Buffalo. He never embraced the team in the city, and after he got paid, the Sabres were forced to ship him out at pennies of his supposed worth. Now he's doing okay with Boston, but it looks like that team is going down very soon in the heaping fire called a rebuild. Number 5, winger Jeff Skinner was extended by the Sabres in 2019, with him set to earn $72 million over the next 8 years with an annual average salary of $9 million. And this was an incredibly short-sighted decision. His contract has turned into one of the worst in the NHL, and it doesn't matter that Skinner had scored 40 goals in his first season with the Sabres. He was worth $6 to $7 million tops. In typical Sabres fashion, this contract quickly backfired, with Skinner mightily struggling under Ralph Krueger, scoring only 21 goals over his next 2 seasons with him as the coach. Fortunately, he rebounded this past season, scoring 33 goals and tying his career high in points with 63. But his 4th season bounce back doesn't change the fact that Skinner's contract will be a major eyesore on the Sabres payroll over the next 5 seasons. Number 4, veteran Kyle Okposo was signed to a 6-year deal worth $42 million back in 2016, and boy, this deal felt wrong from the very beginning. Okposo had 1 good year of production, his first year in Buffalo, but when he suffered a concussion late in the 2016-17 season, things went downhill. After scoring 19 goals in his first season, he then had 15, then 14, 9, and down to just 2 in the COVID season. If it weren't for his most recent season, where he had 21 goals in 74 games, Okposo would be higher on this list. He has a good veteran presence and has been touted as being the next Sabres captain of this young team, but is that really worth $7 million? Number 3, Matt Moulson. He was re-signed by the Buffalo Sabres from Minnesota in the 2014 offseason to the tune of a 5-year, $25 million contract. He had been good with the Sabres before, namely in the 2013-14 season where he had 29 points in 44 games. But that was a flash in the pan as he failed to even come close to that stat line despite playing double the number of games. He had only 13 goals in 2014-15. Failed even more under Dan Bousman in 2015, had a late season rebound in 2016-17, and then cratered off in his final season with the Sabres. He went pointless at the beginning of the 2017-18 season, and because of that, and after all these numbers, and him losing a clear pep in his step, the Sabres waived Moulson. Then, in what has to be the biggest middle finger to a player from an organization, the Sabres saw him clear waivers, then didn't even clear a space in Rochester for Moulson, and promptly loaned him to the AHL's Ontario Reign. Now, he's a middling AHLer with the Hershey Bears. Good job once again, Tim Murray. It should be easy to guess who these final 2 selections are, with the number 2 slot going to Ville Leino. Ville literally called Buffalo a jail and said it was very unpleasant and he found it hard to live up to his contract. Well, the feeling was mutual. Darcy Regier signed Leino to a 6-year, $27 million deal, and this one was baffling from the start. He only had 1 good year of production with the Flyers, and he didn't even hit 20 goals that season. In Buffalo, his production took a nosedive, with his highest point total coming in his first season with the team, scoring only 8 goals and 25 points. An injury here and there forced Leino to only play 64 games over his final 2 seasons in Buffalo. His final season with the Sabres was noteworthy, though, as he didn't even score a single goal in 58 games, posting only 15 assists that season. He was beyond terrible, and was eventually bought out by the Sabres 3 years into his 6-year deal. Number 1, Christian Ehrhoff, a defenseman who the Sabres felt was worth a 10-year contract. Now, I know the Sabres signed him in 2011, but I had to mention it in this video. These kinds of deals where the player signed past 8 or 9 years doesn't ever really work out, but that didn't really bother Darcy Regier, and he took the young defenseman up on his large contract demands. He only played 3 seasons with the Sabres, with his best season coming in the final one, where he scored 6 goals and had 33 points in 79 games. The other 2 were marred by decent play, but decent play doesn't warrant a 10-year, $40 million contract. He was expectedly bought out once the Sabres entered their first rebuild in 2014. But this move means that the Sabres will keep paying Ehrhoff until the 2027-28 season. It is an absolutely terrible contract, on par with what the Isles gave to Rick DiPietro back in the day. So that rounds out 10 of the worst contracts given by the Sabres since the Pegulas took over a little over a decade ago. Comment your thoughts down below and smash that like button. Thanks for watching and see you on the next video.